And imagine in areas where there are no potable water, for example, where the parents are not so buoyant to be able to boil the water before they use, you understand, to be able to purify them properly. So I think when it comes to babies falling sick from these things after the first 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding, the issue of cleanliness, how some of these things are prepared. I agree that no prices have gone up, might not be so affordable again to buy some of this formula. The local alternatives too, most likely would have gone up out of the reach of some parents. Because I know that people experiment with all this the what's it called, this millet.
Yes.
Millet, they cook it. I also know that people, it's the way they use crayfish with it. The mothers know all these things. I'm not go too deep into it, but I think when it comes to that period of after the first 6 months, the major concern I always have with how children are fed, babies are fed, is always on the issue of hygiene, cleanliness, and the purity that comes with how these things are prepared.
All right. Well, it's on page 4 and 5 if you would like to read that particular story. We're moving on to other issues now. We're talking about the budget. Budget false 2025 budget demands breakdown of TED Fund NJC allocations. The writers to this story condemns 2.49 trillion to RDCs for personnel cost. That's regional development commissions. Lists dangers of $20,000 retirement package for generals. Now, budget has observed certain legacy issues with the proposed 2025 budget of the federal government under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The accountability body therefore called on the National Assembly to proactively address the irregularities and exercise its power of the purse, allowing robust public participation in the budget review process and ensure that the approved budget reflects the needs and preferences of Nigerians through job creation, poverty reduction, and inclusive broad-based economic growth. So, Fuad, budget highlighted quite a lot of anomalies with the 2025 budget, one of which includes the allocations to certain agencies and the refusal to reflect allocations to others. For example, budget highlighted that the allocations for over 60 government-owned enterprises, including the Nigerian Port Authority, the Customs Service, the Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, their budget was conspicuously absent from the proposed budget, or their allocations. It wasn't there. It wasn't written in the budget whatsoever. And then there was also the conversation around the regional development commissions. Their complaint is that all of the monies that is allocated to this particular development commission, I think the smallest is over 3 billion naira, that they put it under, and yes, they put it under personnel cost. So it makes it difficult for them to actually trace what the money is for. Personnel cost simply means payment of the salary of the individuals and their cost of operation. So it doesn't really cover. Are you going to use this to build the roads? Are you going to use this for the cleanup going on in the Niger Delta with their water? That there are no specifics. You give them, like I said, the lowest amount for this regional commission is over 3 billion naira. You cannot put that under personnel cost. Tell us step by step how this money would be used. And then they raised the conversation around the Lagos Calabar Express Coastal Road. The Coastal Highway. There's absolutely nothing there. There's no specific allocation for that project, and they believe that with that happening, that means the federal government will have to pull resources from other agencies or from other places to fund that road, and that also makes it difficult for people to track or monitor the spendings that are going on. For more problems have been highlighted with the budget, aside from misappropriation, concerns of budget padding, white elephant projects. There are also conversations about how monies are not being reflected or represented properly within the budget.
You said it all. See, that's the budget we have. And for people who may have thought that I've been too critical of this budget, on a daily basis, we are getting to now understand, the documents we are dealing with for 2025. I think there's no day now that either the people in their own analysis of the budget, or institutions like, organizations like Budget, Sarah, are not also telling us that, look, this document is bound to fail. It's just what it is. I've told you that, Sage, I've had to take my time to go through the entire budget. And for me, the document is taking us nowhere. And the things you've highlighted, look, I don't know whether it's in the papers. Something dramatic and interesting happened yesterday at the floor of the Senate. where simple questions were thrown to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Awale, as to, look, tell us, you've come again with this budget, but it would be nice for you to tell us, number one, your complete review of the 2024 budget and why it is still running till June. And then secondly, sir, can you please tell us what we've saved so far from subsidy removal and how it has been spent? And in the report and from the Senate session, the plenary session, it was clear that Mr. Wale, the Minister of Finance, was not even prepared.
He requested a closed door session right after that.
He had to, he was caught unaware, he was not prepared, and at that point he had to request that the appropriation committee give him the privilege of allowing that session to be held in a private session, a closed door session. And the media, people that were available, were told to excuse so that the private session, closed session could hold. Say, what does that tell you? If the Minister of Finance is not equipped, readily equipped with information on what we saved and how we spend subsidy monies from subsidy removal, a simple matter as that. You should understand that. Look, when we keep talking about all of these sweet words, rhetorics, all of these things that keep coming into the media to get people unnecessarily excited. You see, it's not. You see, patriotism is not about living in self-denial. Patriotism is not, because it's your party, you allow these things to slide, you give excuses when you know there's something wrong. How patriotic are you when you are completely deceitful about the reality of the country at this time? In one breath, we were told that the government was going to run an economy where inflation would drop, headline inflation would drop from around 34 point something to 15%. See, from this budget, this 2025 budget we have reviewed so far, that is basically a consumption budget. See, if you look at most of the items, most of the items are going into recurrent expenditure, personnel costs, and what have you. How are we going to achieve a 15% inflation rate with what has been put in this budget? And even in situations where we take care of capital expenditure, we make appropriations for it. At least we also reviewed it. So it was said that, look, the last budget, about when it comes to recurrent expenditure, almost 100% it was met. But the capital expenditure component of the budget, it was just about 20%. So, you see, we can continue to highlight some of these things. How do you budget for MBA agencies without including them in the document? The Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, one of the legacy projects of the administration, is consequently meeting. Appropriations for that project is consequently meeting in the budget. It's not specific. What they will tell you is that maybe it has been put under the budget of the Ministry of Works. Or why not have the details? And then if you look at what budget is saying, like there are also some appropriations that don't have any breakdown. I told you yesterday, said that even the budget of the National Assembly does not have any breakdown. It's just about 344 billion something that was put in the document. How it will be spent, nobody knows. Where the money should go to, nobody knows. And we should keep quiet over it. We should not talk about it so that we pretend that we are patriotic. And that's what patriotism now means. Because people are now defining patriotism. Patriotism is that, because of your own personal interest now, the things that are wrong with the country, you keep quiet about it. The same people that were really critical of these things in the past, because they are now in government and are now major beneficiaries of the rot, they now have selective amnesia. There's now selective judgment as to the reality of the country. We are not going to do that. And so again, my conclusion is that, look, this is a budget that is taking us nowhere.
Well, that particular story, excuse me, you're going to find on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Still speaking on the budget, Fuad, we're talking about Lagos State now. Lagos lowers FAC expectation, targets 2.3 trillion IGR, considers integrated road transport system. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu yesterday signed Lagos State's 3.36 trillion naira 2025 appropriation bill into law, with the nation's commercial capital planning to borrow 398.6 billion to finance the budget amid cautious optimism from the Federation Account Allocation Committee (FAC). The governor described the appropriation, tagged the budget of sustainability as a blueprint for continuity, resilience, and shared prosperity, and emphasized that the budget is focused on 5 main pillars: infrastructure, sustainability, economic diversification, social inclusion, human capital development, environmental sustainability, and governance and institutional reform. So the revenue framework is projecting 2.34 trillion for total internally generated revenue and about 626.13 billion from federal transferred, and it will be anchored on innovation, accountability, and sustainability, amongst many other things. Well, Fuad, Lagos State budget has been signed. 3.36 trillion naira has been signed, and the interesting part for me, Fuad, is the fact that they're not relying on FAC allocation, probably because of the controversy that has come out of, for example, the tax reform bills, or some provisions in the tax reform bills, and how chances are they might not be getting as much as they used to from the Federal Allocation Committee, and so they are focusing more on generating their own money and depending less on FAC. Is this a system that you think would work for a state like Lagos State, being, one of the capital cities in Nigeria?
Well, Lagos State has always had the capacity to generate revenue, because it's the commercial hub, commercial nerve center of the country. So you'd expect that, look, it is well positioned to be able to raise this money. Even though people are complaining seriously about heavy taxes, multiple levies, and all manner of things in Lagos, but it's a state that always has got the capacity to be able to raise these monies. Again, if you look at the report, basically this is coming from 2 major sources. While the Lagos State government is downplaying the possibility of FAC allocation taking care of this budget, what they are looking at basically is to look at the possibility of borrowings and, of course, internet generated revenue (IGR). But unfortunately, SAGE has not really been able to get a handle on the budget itself. Even before it was debated and passed, I've really not been able to, check the details. But the devil is in the detail, really. It's not about all of this sweet talk. It would have been nice to also the budget performance index of the Lagos State government budget for 2024. Look at the items that have been captured. It's not about the figures now. I think by now we all should have learned, from the fact that, look, the figures don't really matter. It's about what happens with the figures and how well we do with it. So, but we just have to wait whether this budget of sustainability will sustain anything, really. In terms of performance, I was having a little debate with a friend yesterday, and I said that, look, Lagos has always benefited from it being a federal capital territory. There are some infrastructure that existed in Lagos before this new democratic dispensation that would have been extremely difficult for us to do, if not that Lagos was capital that have been done in the past. For example, projects like the Third Mainland Bridge. Just imagine that there was no Third Mainland Bridge from 1999 till date. I think from around 2003 or 2006 or so, we've been talking about the Fourth Mainland Bridge. We have not been able to do it. Some of the integrated transport system we are talking about, which comes under the intermodal transport system plan for the state, the blue rail, the red rail, yes, we're seeing some level of work around it, but one would have expected that by now, with the monies available to Lagos, with the level of monies we've also borrowed for some of these projects, there would have been a closure to most of the projects. But hey, the blue rail is still not completed. The red rail, I assume, is still some level of work in progress, even though, at least to some extent, we started to see some work. But if you look at the comprehensive integrated master plan that the Lagos State government has presented in the past, you would have known that, look, by now we should have gotten better, with some of these projects. But as it is, we'll continue to talk about the fact that Lagos State has got better potential. Lagos can do better than what it is doing now, because of the opportunities, the revenue, the resources available to it. We don't really count the cost. We don't really count the cost. We don't put value on cost, really. Yeah. for us to be able to question whether what we have is actually in tandem with what we've got. For me, with the potential that Lagos has got, with the revenue that Lagos generates, and the ability to generate, I think Lagos could have done better, really, if the resources of the people have been more committed, to improving infrastructure in the state and bettering the lives of the people. But it is what it is, a conversation that will never end. I'm a Lagosian, I know what I'm saying.
Page 6 of the Guardian newspaper have the full story. If you're just joining us, this is Trends in the Papers on Mainland 98.3 FM. We're looking through the front pages of our dailies. I'm talking to Fuad Said, who has so far been providing us with context to the headlines as reported in our dailies. My name is Sage Babalola. Don't forget that we're streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube, so please check our streaming platform. Right this very moment, you can actually start to interact with us using the live chat option if you want to say something about the stories as we go along, and you can also even interact with other people who are commenting on our platform. So please join the live stream and let the conversation continue. We're going back to the papers now. The headline reads, Northern groups seek reopening of land borders. The writer to that says continued closure adversely impacting economy. Now, coalition of northern groups, civil society organization and other stakeholders have urged the federal government to reopen the country's land borders to boost Nigeria's economy, saying the continued closure of the border has had a devastating impact on the economy and livelihood of citizens. A communique signed by the spokesman for the northern group, Mohammed Sanusi Ali, stated that the continued closure of land borders has had a devastating impact on the economy and livelihood of citizens, particularly in border communities. The town hall urges the federal government to reopen land borders immediately to ease economic hardship, promote trade and reduce the burden on struggling Nigerians. The northern elders are raising concerns about the border closure. They believe that it's more or less affecting our economy because we're not really able to trade. And the border were initially closed to allow for local production so that we do not have to depend on import, and we're forced to produce at least the food items that we consume, an endeavor that we have failed at terribly. Now, that's not the only concern that was raised by the northern elders. They once again spoke about the tax reform bills and how it would impact the north. They also spoke about the value-added tax. As you know, there are recommendations that VAT should go from 7.5 to 10%. They're saying that 10% is too much. Even the current 7.5 is too much. What they want is a reduction to 3%. Value-added tax should be reduced to about 3%. Alternative revenue generating strategies should be explored. And they also kicked against the current tariff hike. Remember, Bosun Tijani was on TV yesterday talking about how, well, the telcos, for example, are talking about the need for a tariff hike so that they can continue operation, and they might not oblige the telcos the 100% increase, but there will be an increase in tariff, one that would not necessarily rip the pockets of Nigerians. Now, all these three things are the concerns of the northern elders. What is the possibility of their demands, and do you think that truly other revenue generating techniques we can employ rather than these ones that have been recommended by the federal government?
Well, these are suggestions. These are recommendations from the northern elders. I think they have a right to also opine on some of the issues we've been talking about, especially as it concerns the welfare of their people and the development of their region. The first one for me, the issue of the borders, I think is the most important part of the conversation. Yes, we'll continue to talk about alternative sources of revenue, the conversations around VAT going to 10% or whether it should drop from 7.5%. Those are conversations that will continue, really. Even the economic experts don't have a consensus of opinion on some of these issues. So, but on the issue of the borders, it will still be nice to know why the presidential directive of the president on duty waivers for food, for grains and some of the food items that was initially listed, for people to bring in and then enjoy some form of importation waivers did not happen. I don't think it happened because the idea then was also to help with this issue of food. People will always tell you that, look, whether you close your borders or you don't close it, our borders are so close to the point that, look, what you just do is to create a black market for these things, to create smuggling, opportunities for smuggling of some of these things. So the fact that you close it does not mean these things are not happening. Instead, what it has happened is that it goes through the back door. And so you create a black market, a smuggling opportunity for these things. Why not even make it official so that you can even track the trade? And I also see people who argue that, look, if you don't really have immigration issues in your country, like the US, for example, that will close its borders because it feels that illegal aliens, people are trooping into their country and have become a problem. If your own issue is the issue of trade, what about the issue of comparative advantage? Say it. And what people are saying is that, look, why not look at what you have that others don't have? Let them bring in what they have. They cannot have it all, and you cannot have it all. So why don't you balance your trade by saying, okay, if you have rice, you give it to us. But you know what, we have yam, we have plantain, we have cocoyam, we have other things that we can give to you. Now, look, the world has gotten to the point where it's becoming a bit obsolete. It's becoming a bit old-fashioned to begin to think of even closing your borders. What you should do is to, have a control of your borders to the point where you are able to properly monitor trade and allow for things. The entire idea of even the ECOWAS stage was to create some form of economy around the West African sub-region. Free entry, free exit of economic activity. But closing your borders, how does that even conform to the initial philosophy and thinking of the ECOWAS sub-region? But again, I understand why the northern leaders are complaining seriously. The Nigerian border, for example, is a big problem for them. They do a lot of trade along that border. And now that those borders are closed, a lot of the communities around the borders are complaining that, look, their businesses have been stifled. Farm produce that they used to take from that place has become extremely difficult. And they have to always go through smugglers, through the back door, which is more difficult, really, for them. Again, these are things that the government will have to look at and see how they can make it better for the people of these mother communities.
All right, I would like us to talk about this particular story, Fuad. Anyways, that story is on page 26 of the Guardian newspaper. I'd like us to have a conversation around the agreement that we now have with China. I'm talking about the currency swap deal. That actually should have been the first story. It just caught my attention in the corner of the page, or at the corner of the page. Let me read that out so we can talk about it. Tinubu calls for increased currency swap between China and Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu on Thursday urged the Chinese government to increase the $2 billion currency swap between Nigeria and China to enhance trade between the two countries. He also called for an upward review of the $50 billion aid package for Africa, which China's President Xi Jinping announced last year. China and Nigeria recently renewed their currency swap agreement, valued at 15 billion won, approximately $2 billion, to enhance trade and investment. And receiving Wang Yi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, at the State House, the president said increasing the level of currency swap would speed up the infrastructural developments in Nigeria and deepen the strategic bilateral relations. Now, for a lot of people are excited. Well, let's say that there are mixed reactions regarding this, and the currency swap typically is supposed to help, because at least now you're not too concerned about paying extravagant interest, because it's more or less just two countries with their currency that you pay back with the equivalent of what you were given, unlike when you operate with the dollar, where fluctuations in dollar rates affects
and make you just owe more without even adding more loan.
Exactly, but that swap deal exonerates you of that. The amount of money you borrow is the exact amount of money that you're going to pay back. And yes, Nigeria is demanding for more money from China at this time, and China does somehow believe in our economic stability, and they're willing to pursue this. But Fuadi will address this story, but then it just takes me back to the conversation of BRICS and the call that Nigeria should do what it can to join BRICS, because BRICS, one of the foundation of BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Yes, their concern is to minimize the hold that the dollar has on global economy. Let us all operate with our own currency and just jettison the dollar for now. Do you think that Nigeria needs to intensify efforts to join BRICS? And also, what do you think about this renewed agreement between China and Nigeria?
It's unfortunate that we are just even talking about Nigeria finding a way to join BRICS. Because whatever happened when the BRICS was coming together, Nigeria was not considered ahead of South Africa. To get us thinking really about the perception of people about how things are done in Nigeria. I think even as of 2022, Nigeria was still the largest economy in Africa. I think we are now fourth. Behind South Africa, Egypt, and I think Algeria. So if BRICS did not consider the largest economy as of 2022 as a worthy member of the BRICS. Despite all of the potentials you have, human nature. So I keep telling it, because apart from maybe structural issues, governance issues, of systemic issues, there's no way South Africa should even be rubbing shoulders with Nigeria in terms of capacity, in terms of economy. If you look at what God has given to us and the potential that we have as a nation. But what about governance? Because again, these resources will not naturally transform themselves to make things better for Nigerians. Some leaders will have to sit on policies to ensure that these God-given resources begin to work for the people. And that's where we have our problem. So at the end of the day, whatever we are able to do with China is fantastic. China is no longer a nation that anyone can ignore. Their technology, the size of their economy, the way they have been able to spread themselves all around the world, to bring what you call the Chinese business culture home for most of the countries in Africa, means that, look, the more we are able to strengthen our relationship with them, the better for us, because it serves as an alternative, really, when it comes to development partnership around the world. So it's a nice one that we are looking at expanding this currency swap. At least it takes away some level of pressure from us when it comes to over reliance on dollar for transactions. So we are not going to be transacting with China, for example, we're talking about dollars. So it's good that we can be talking about Naira and the Chinese yen. So it becomes a standard of transaction between the two countries. And that's why I think Nigeria is calling for it to be expanded more, so that we can have more conversations around the two currencies and see how we can, it can be a win-win situation between the two nations. In terms of infrastructure and borrowing, I think we have already agreed that we'll continue to borrow, even though there are questions around the efficacies of this borrowing in terms of what we're really using it for. If these borrowings are for infrastructure, fantastic. It's just what it is. We just have to look at how we can improve on infrastructure. The deficit is high and something has to be done. And I think China can help. With our rail system, for example, we relied on China.
Yes.
And I think so far so good, we've done a fantastic job really.
Yes.
With our rail transport, with even road constructions in different parts of the country. So I think China has become a strategic partner with Nigeria when it comes to infrastructure, trade, and commerce. There's a part of the story, I don't know whether it's reported, where it was said that China is also helping with the issue of weapons. Technology training of our military personnel.
Yes. Has that, yes, training and arms production as well.
So I also like that. If the West is not going to be very truthful with us, if the West is not going to be so open for us to be able to buy weapons and then share some level of technological innovations to when it comes to fabrication of weapons and what have you, and China is willing to do so, why not? Luckily, our foreign policy is not aligned. We can trade with anybody. We can work with anybody. We can be friends with any nation in the world. So, but again, we must remember that as we go into these partnerships, no country in the world will willingly transfer their technology to you. Like the late sage, Chief Awolowo said in the past, you have to go there to steal that technology, bring it home, and then develop it, homegrown solutions to your own problem. So we just have to position ourselves to be able to go out there, steal and copy this technology, bring it back home, and then make it work for us. So I think this is a good one. But again, we also have to position ourselves, to be able to now ensure that this partnership brings the desired result for us in terms of the benefit.
Well, thank you very much, Fuad. We appreciate you for your analysis. I'll take one more story on The Guardian so we could read the Punch newspaper. Here, boundary. Federal government sues for peace as Abia Cross River renew hostilities. The National Boundary Commission has called for peaceful existence among border communities in Abia and Cross River State as tension escalates. The Director General, Adamu Adaji, made this appeal during fresh violent clashes between Isu community in Arochukwu Local Council of Abia and Ukwambong Ukwa Iburutu community of Udupani Local Council of Cross River, which claims life this month. In a statement yesterday, the head of Information and Public Relations, F.A. Owukborie, condemned the killings and extended condolences to the affected community. He urged all stakeholders to exercise restraint and avoid actions that could undermine ongoing boundary resolution efforts. There's going to be a peace and productive discussion ahead of January 20 meeting. So, Fuad, boundary conflict still continues here in Nigeria, where communities, in a bid to establish their boundaries, resort to violence, and it leads to the loss of life. I need you to maybe emphasize what these communities fear so much when it comes to border infiltration that causes them to be willing to go into violent altercations that lead to a loss of life. What are they afraid of? What are these communities afraid of, considering they're not strangers to each other? Why are they so afraid of the other person being on their land such that they're willing to kill each other for it?
The land first. That land is the first thing. And then the things under the land. And then later the things on top of the land. You understand that? So it's all our land, really. Whether eventually what is under the land in terms of resources. You understand? Because again, at the end of the day, the resources speaks to what the communities can eventually get and negotiate with. You understand?
Yeah.
And then it is on the land. Of course, if you take your mind back to the ᴏᴜᴛᴜᴇ crisis, you know, a local government is positioned there. There was no position there, and the caravan lines were lost because of just boundary areas. Local government is supposed to be here, it was taken there, and all of those things. Remember, there's also politics in that comes with some of these things. You understand? So, but it's just really, and that's why it's called, there's a National Boundary Commission, which is supposed to help solve this problem. These are your boundaries. But you know, boundaries are difficult, really. Because again, sometimes you go into some of these communities, it's too close to call. You cannot even separate some of these communities. Some of them speak the same language. Some of them are the same thing practically in culture and tradition. But you always have situations like that where people fight over land. If my land is not your land, it's ancestral land. It's not. We just appeal that people, because we would always have this conversation. There would always be boundary disputes. Even if countries are still disputing boundaries, how much more local communities? I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to ask yourself, the Israeli-Gaza war, it's not about land, about.
I mean, it is border.
So if that issue, how many years down the line from now, around 1948, when Israeli nation was created, and then we had that problem. If that issue has not been resolved now, it means that issues of boundary is something that might never go away. But for it to now descend, degenerate to the point of people killing themselves, is what we should speak against, really. There might be this dispute. That's why you have the boundary commission. There's also the legal option. You can go to court to push your case. But you now start dispute around boundary issues to the point where you now start to kill yourself. It's a no for me, really. And I think it's just important that on this platform we appeal to all our communities and community leaders, to be a bit more responsible. The Okoloma problem too is a boundary problem. And look at what has happened to that community now, to the point where soldiers were killed, and then, leaders of, I think, the Okoma community now from ᴜᴜᴜ are died in detention. And so sometimes it's always better to judge than to war. Let's just be more peaceful around some of these issues.
Well, there's a meeting on the 20th of January to discuss how to resolve this issue. Probably do some sort of geographical calculations and give one half to one person, one half to the other person. Let's see what strategy they have in place.
The historical narratives that most communities put up to say, I own this land, you don't own this land. It sometimes comes like tales by moonlight. They say, this father, my forefather started planting here. And at the end of the day, it's just discretionary. You probably just have to be ready for peace and to agree, because historical documentation of boundaries are extremely difficult to accept if you really don't want to accept them.
Page 28 of The Guardian has that story. That's pretty much everything we have for you on the front page of The Guardian newspaper. You are still on to Mainland 98.3 FM. It's trends in the papers, and we're about to move now to the Punch newspaper. The top story here is, of course, the deal with Nigeria and China. They plan to collaborate on military training and also arms production, as well as the currency swap deal. You can check page 2 of the Punch newspaper for that. There's also Afenifere Igboho offer support as police squad combats South Southwest bandits. So for the conversation around the relocation of bandits from the Northwest following bombardment to the Southwest, as raised by Governor Seyi Makinde, has caused a lot of individuals, stakeholders, security agencies to begin to collaborate. Afenifere for one, Sunday Igboho for one, they are offering their support with to the police and other security agencies to deal with these bandits. And just like you said, Fuad, aside from the groundwork of all of this, don't you believe that intelligence gathering, for example, is the first line of action if we're serious about dealing with these bandits and their relocation?
It shouldn't be the first thing. It should be the ultimate thing, because crimes are better dealt with when you stop them before they happen. And how do you stop a crime from happening? It's to be ahead of the criminals. And how do you get ahead of the criminals? Get intelligence. Know where they are, where they are hiding, what they are planning to do, and before they strike, you go ahead of them. So the governor of your state, Mr. Jᴏɪᴜ, has gotten us thinking. He set our minds on this issue. How we were sleeping. That look, as these guys are being dealt with in the north, as the military is going after them, they are moving to other places, they are migrating to other places, and one of the areas they are coming to is the southwest, and we have to be prepared to ensure we don't provide a safe haven for them, to the point where they now become a problem for us here. So what I'm saying is, yes, we have to do everything that we need to do. All the local communities now have to brace up. Traditional rulers, youth organizations, everybody has to be on the alert. Who are the people coming into your communities? Where are they? And our forests too. That's why our forest rangers, the hunters, the local hunters. I don't know. I think we still have the 괏ɪᴜᴜ. We still have them. Why not? Because it's very important.
How would I know? I only know of the FBI. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. I wasn't born and brought up here. How would I know?
You do anything at 괏ɪᴜᴜ?
I don't know what I say. I don't do 괏ɪ��ᴜ.
Well, you know how much.
Of course I do. I mean, come on.
Okay, so we just have to do what we need to do to protect ourselves here in the southwest. The problem I have with a Sunday Igboho conversation in this now is the bigotry that he brings to the table when he talks about some of these
I
things.
deliberately ignored his comments, to be honest. I deliberately just ignored it. Yeah, he said that his narratives are always very that's why I deliberately ignored his comments.
He's going to now mess up the entire conversation.
Yeah, we're talking security.
So he's going to come with his own bigotry and then begin to paint some tribe black now, and then if you have a problem, let's deal with the problem, and be careful to make it I think somebody is your enemy, and at the end of the day, it's all just lies. It's just positioning and negative narratives and positioning. So we have a problem. We can solve our problem. Security is working with the government and politicians, and it's also good that at least our local community leaders are also bracing up to ensure that these criminals don't give us problem here in the southwest.
All right, that's on page 11 of the Punch newspaper. Let's talk power sector. The Punch tells us that power stagnates at 4,500 megawatts despite $3.23 billion loans. Nigeria's electricity generation has continued to hover around an average of 4,500 megawatts despite the country securing loans totaling $3.23 billion in about 4 years from international financial institutions. Global institutions such as the World Bank, the Africa Development Bank, and the Japan International Cooperation Agency have supported the power sector with billions of dollars in loans, but many parts of Nigeria still suffer insistent blackout. The funds were approved to finance various projects to address the country's electricity challenges and also to improve access to reliable power supply. However, power generation in the country has persistently hovered around 4,500 megawatts for a population of over 200 million people. Fuad Adelabu, Minister of Power, he was quite optimistic that at least before the end of 2024/2025, we should be able to generate at least 6,000 megawatts. We have the capacity for it. And yes, they did go up. To be honest, they did go from about 2,000 megawatts to 4,000 megawatts, 3,000, and then it started to fluctuate. And we saw the national grid collapse. We saw the TCN say they don't even have the facility to collect the generated power. And then the discourse as well with their issues of indebtedness and how gas is not even being supplied to them. It's just a lot of things going on. But the interesting part here is that they always highlight a lack of resources as why we still see abysmal performance within the power sector. That has been one of the largest excuses for the inadequacy within the power sector. But the report is telling us that in at least 4 years, you've gotten over $3 billion to at least rectify, let me say, the low-hanging fruits in the power sector, at least the power infrastructures, to rebuild them, to fix them, the transmission lines. Why is it that with all of this money, we're producing lesser than we anticipated to do when we didn't really have as much for it? How do you rationalize and make sense of this?
It's very good. How? Where?
Is you I'm asking. I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
I don't know too. I don't know. Because we keep hearing, and to think that this is a sector that has been privatized, a major part of the value chain has been privatized. And you are still hearing of government funding, government still borrowing, to help fix some of the issues around the sector. And while this sector keeps complaining about lack of money, lack of finance, the people who are supposed to enjoy the services that come from this sector are also complaining of paying for what is not available, overburdened with high tariffs and all of that. So, you see, when a sector is hijacked by a cabal, when a sector is hijacked by people who are just greedy, who have no business in the business, this is what you get. I keep talking about the fact that sector, it will only take God to help us deliver that sector from the hands of those who have hijacked it. They pinned it down, they put it in their pocket. And until we undo what we did in 2013, we are going nowhere. See, that thing, look, the idea Jonathan came with them, all this Genco, this Kiniko, that they came with them, which was supposed to help really bring some serious form of investment from the private sector. That's why we keep questioning that, the things that are held by the private sector in the value chain, they should even come and tell us how much have we invested gone on. Because even in our budget now, we are still budgeting to help buy transformers and wires.
By private enterprise. Wow.
And to even think that, look, a lot of the banks have even taken over some of these things. They borrowed money, they can't pay bankers. They can't pay their bankers back. You can't even buy transformers, you can't do anything. Prepaid meter, you cannot handle. The government is still subsidizing, funding it. We are still talking about, we are talking about almost 2.7 trillion something with you as we speak. We are still talking about over $3 billion, and yet look at what we have. That's why I don't know what else to say. You don't know what to say.
Well, that story is on page 19 of the Punch newspaper. We're out of time. I'll read the rest of the headlines. Lucky for us, we've been able to address this on The Guardian, but just for the sake of conversation, I'll read it. Senate grills Finance Minister over subsidy savings is on page 12. Man jailed 2 years for defrauding American of $345,000 is on page 5. We have also here General Hydrocarbons account frozen amid $225 million debt dispute with First Bank. That's everything that the Punch reports this morning. And finally, for Vanguard, the top story here is insecurity. Nigerians lose loved ones, now live in fear, is on page 14 and 15. Bloody January, accidents fire claim 242 lives in just 8 days, is on page 5. We have President Tinubu's 6th increase in currency swap between Nigeria and China, is on page 9. And MBS to include prostitution and other illegal activities in GDP calculation. How did I not see this? Fad, wait, we're going to talk about this. For some reason, I skipped this. Hold on a sec. Let's take this break. We'll come back and talk about this. Thank you very much for being on standby.
I was waiting for it.
Let's go on a break. We'll be back and talk about this before Mainland Focus. I'm Sage Babalola. The Morning Express continues. Don't go anywhere.